In a couple of minutes. To make sure we stay on time, I'm going to explain the format. This is something we haven't done before. It's called a chain reaction panel. And the way this works is rather than the usual panel where I ask a question and everybody says the same thing 3 times over and you all fall asleep, we're going to have basically a series of 7-minute discussions. So with me I have Rory, Gary, and Jody, who are going to talk about what it means to be a sort of street hustling entrepreneur. But we're going to do it in 7-minute chunks. So I'm going to start out by interviewing Gary for 7 minutes. We're going to have a conversation about that. And then we're going to move on gradually from that. And each of us is going to sort of interview the next one, which we hope will lead to some more interesting conversations. The subject of this is really street smart entrepreneurship, the hustle. And with me today, I wish I were a hustler, but with me I've got 3 people who definitely are, to talk a little bit about what street smart entrepreneurship means, how that works, and some of the issues around it. So I'm going to start off by inviting Gary up here to join me. Hi, Gary.
Hello, hello, hello.
Round of applause for our first victim. So, and we're going to just sit here and chat. I'd invite you over to this side, but I think you might fall off the podium or something. So,
I feel a little short.
Yeah, you want to slide over here a bit, maybe? Yeah, just come on over here so people can see you, okay? All right, so first of all, Gary, who the hell are you?
I'm Gary Pudles, founder and CEO of AnswerNet. We are the world's largest privately held telephone answering service company and a full-service supplier of call center services out of 50 call centers in 25 states and 2 provinces.
Your IVR with people behind it, or?
People. It's all about the people.
Right. What sucks the most about that?
What sucks the most about it is not being able to handle every opportunity that comes my way. In the U.S. alone, there are 61,000 call centers. There's always M&A activity. There's always new things to add. There's always new things to do. And you know, as an entrepreneur, you see opportunity everywhere. It's almost a sickness. I don't know, any of you have that same sickness? You know, every time I open my eyes, I see a way of making money, and I just don't have the resources to make all the money that I know I could make.
That's a rough problem to have.
It is.
So, topic of this is street smart entrepreneurship. Would you describe yourself as a hustler?
Okay, yeah. You know, twist my arm hard enough. I am, and I never thought of myself as one until somebody else called it to me. You know, I found my business, I found my current business on the internet by writing down all the things that I liked and all the things that I didn't like, and I went out on the internet to find a business to buy. And, you know, that took a lot of punches in the face and meetings with people who, you know, had no intention of helping me, but, you know, that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I would say I'm a little scrappy.
So does that mean you just have low self-esteem and you're okay with being shot down a lot? Is that a criteria?
You know, I think having low self-esteem is indicative of most entrepreneurs, quite frankly, because they're always trying to figure out the next thing. Many entrepreneurs have this weirdness about them. They want to be great. They want to be disruptive. They want to be remembered. They want to accomplish something that nobody else has accomplished, and it's somewhere inside you. So is it a sense of low self-esteem? You have to have the confidence to jump into the abyss, but I think you have to have the desire inside to want to be something that most people will never. I don't want to keep going, but I think it's important. Everybody has an inner entrepreneur. I teach entrepreneurship, first steps, at a university down in the States, and everybody, I believe, has an inner entrepreneur. Not everybody has the guts to do it, but the drive to become something special, maybe that does come from low self-esteem.
So you think that entrepreneurship and hustle is something that can be taught? If it's in there and you're teaching it?
I think that entrepreneurship, business skills, rules of thumb, simplicity about the business can be taught. I think that inside everybody, the entrepreneurship gene is already there. It's a matter of whether you've got the right spark. If you've met the right person, you've been in the right situation. You know, a lot of entrepreneurs start because they are underemployed, which is code for they've been fired from a good job. And, you know, that's certainly how I started my entrepreneurial dream. I often say, did I quit or get fired on that day? I'm pretty sure I got fired, but I'm not going to tell it ever.
So this is a personal question. You can tell me to shut up, but did you come from a rich family or not?
No, my father declared bankruptcy 4 times before he was 35.
Wow.
And when I graduated from law school, I was $65,000 in debt. And 2 weeks later, I did the smart thing of getting married.
I would have thought you'd declare bankruptcy 2 weeks later. That'd be
Yeah, no,
You're
no.
a lawyer. You can file your own
Actually,
papers,
no,
right?
in the States, you can't discharge school loans.
Oh, wow.
But, so, I started that way, and, it sort of makes, it sort of impacts you. Debt is one of those kind of funny things that impacts you. We're all, as entrepreneurs, wondering, do we go equity, do we go debt, do we go mix of the two? And I think where you come from often will determine, and going back to, you're talking about self-esteem, I think your willingness to take outside money often comes from the amount of confidence that you have as an entrepreneur. Do I think that I can raise money, do what I do, and not get fired by my own investors? And it's a real conversation we have with ourselves all the time.
So you've raised a bunch of interesting points, and I don't want to steal all the thunder from the remainder of the conversations, but the classic story of PayPal, right? That they launched when they were not legal to launch in 2 out of the 50 states. Visa and MasterCard couldn't launch because if they launched and they weren't legal in those 2 states, they would have been fined millions of dollars. PayPal had nothing to lose. I mean, they really had $10 million in the bank or whatever. That was all they were going to lose. That nothing to lose attitude for an entrepreneur is transformative, but it's something that you can't really teach. So how do you deal with the tension between, I got nothing to lose, I'm going to hustle, my dad declared bankruptcy, versus everyone's got an entrepreneur inside them, we just have to nurture it?
Well, I think it's a misnomer that you say that even guys with money, even companies with money have nothing to lose, because what drives all of us? What drives all of us is our own internal drive to be recognized, to be successful, and we talk about non-monetary recognition as the best way to motivate employees. Everybody's got something to lose. And what you have to lose is you have potentially the ability to lose your reputation, your time. Really as an entrepreneur and as a human being, the most precious thing we all have is our time. And any time that you sort of make a mistake like that, you can get money back, you can get a company back, but you can't get the time back. So I think in a sense we all sort of have something to lose, and it's the entrepreneur who's willing to take the risk and say, I'm willing to put that time at risk. I can always, I always said if my whole dream of entrepreneurship didn't work, I'd put a sign around my neck saying I'll litigate for food. So, I always had my fallback position.
So, biggest hustle?
The biggest hustle was going out doing an acquisition, which was a company owned by VCs. I had negotiated a handshake price and a term sheet, and I went down there and realized that they were burning $250,000 of monthly revenue on revenues of $240,000. Basically, they were spending twice as much as they were bringing in. I called my partner. I said, "You're not going to believe what I'm going to do." I said, "But I'm going to offer them a number to leave tomorrow." And much to my surprise, they said yes. Now, that was bad enough, so the next day I had to fire 39 people representing $1.9 million in salary, none of which touched a customer. What the CFO failed to tell me was the sales department was at a trade show, and we terminated the credit cards, and they had no way of getting home. So that kind of stuff sucks, but yeah, so that was like sort of the biggest, one of the biggest moments of my career so far.
Nice. All right, I'm going to let you hand things over to Rory. Thank you very much. Next,
Excellent.
come on
Thank
up,
you,
Rory.
Alistair.
Thank you. Oh, wait a second. Am I on?
I don't know, you on?
I'm not. Yeah.
There you go. So Rory, you were telling me earlier that you were an early reseller here in Canada.
Yep.
So tell me what that landscape was like. I mean, it's not like you had a lot of people ahead of you who gave you a roadmap on how to do that.
Right. So you want to talk about hustle? I had no idea as to what the telephone long distance resale business was. I just knew that it had been done in the United States. It was something that was completely fresh, virgin territory here. And the thing I loved about it was its business model because it was predicated on a recurrent revenue model. So I was building every month. It was just growing exponentially. So it was really a fantastic kind of a business. And I've always tried since then to find businesses that are based on that recurrent revenue model. And you want to talk about, Best Hustle was going down and convincing these guys at ACC Long Distance that, I knew everything about the long distance market in Quebec, and that they should put their fortunes in me. And so they did it, and it worked out.
So the day before you started that process, see, I'm in Canada, I use process. The day before you began that process, you had a job.
Right.
How do you mentally go from the job into game time?
So I started my life in real estate development, and I had always wanted to become a real estate developer. The unfortunate timing of that was that interest rates were moving to 16%, and it was very evident that this was going to be a market that only institutions could play in, and that the time of the great entrepreneur in real estate was going to be at an end, and I wanted to play in a big way. So I basically took my nice salary. I had 2 children, and my wife was pregnant with our 3rd daughter, and I phoned her and said, guess what? I'm starting up a new company, and by the way, we don't have any more income. And by the way, I'm going to finance this thing myself. And by the way, banks won't even consider looking at something like this. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. I just knew that I had to continue in that direction. So I left, I just jumped out of the airplane without the parachute, and I figured it out on the free fall.
Okay, so you're out there now, it's day 2, you're looking at the abyss, and was there any point in time as you start building this thing that you look back and said, I want to go back into the womb of a company as opposed to being out here in the world? You're like a baby comes out, you smack him, he starts to cry, and now you're out, we smack you. When did you ever start to cry, or did you?
I will tell you a true story, true tears. It was 12 months after I started. The model just somehow wasn't working. And I remember coming home, it was like 1 a.m., and I remember actually putting my head down on the pillow. My wife was sleeping, kids were sleeping, and I remember actually starting to cry. I had never cried. I started to cry going, what the fuck have I done, basically. And so that was a horrific thing. So, you want to talk about it, right? Setbacks make the person. What do you learn from your setback? So I dusted myself off, and I said, I'm not going to feel sorry for myself, although I deserve to feel sorry for myself. I'm going to go out and I'm going to renegotiate my deal and make it a deal that I can live with. And you know why I'm going to win? I'm going to win because I'm their market share here in Quebec. And so they need me to do this. And I recognized that I was absolutely integrated with them, and that my survival was to their benefit. And so we renegotiated, did the deal, and a year later I sold the company.
Well, you know what, it really sort of sparked something in me, and we didn't talk about this one before, so I want to ask you about it though. At some point in your brain you realized that you had more power and more strength in that negotiation than you had ever thought before.
Yeah.
So what made that change, and how did that change the way you viewed both yourself and your company?
So I guess the thing that became apparent to me after I stopped wallowing was I looked at the business, and I looked at our run rate, and we were getting residual checks for like about $300,000 a month, and we had a long distance run rate of $5 million a month and growing. So we were a significant part. So I knew right there, because they were a public company, I knew that they were doing maybe $50 million in revenue. So if I'm sitting there, I'm 10% of that number, that means I have some kind of leverage.
Right.
So that was the thing, and thank God that I was actually a high school dropout, and the one great thing I did was go back to university, get a finance degree, because I learned how to count, learned how to read a balance sheet, and that became very important to me because of the reading of that balance sheet from those filings that explained to me the leverage that I had.
So you learned, that's interesting you say that. So you dropped out of high school, you go back to school. So do you believe that your entrepreneurship was learned in university, or is it something that you believe you were born with?
Okay, I think everybody's born with, I'm going to call it the, I guess for lack of a better term, the survival particle. And the survival particle is the essence of what we are, and it ends up translating into all of the things that we end up doing. What is going to trigger the survival particle? And as we go, having the survival particle, we are all brought up very different ways. I was an insecure guy. I was a guy who needed to prove that I could actually do it and that I belonged. So that was kind of the trigger for me. And then when I went out and I fell off this cliff, after I started my first company, I worked harder than I had ever worked hard. And so I believe that everybody has the embers of entrepreneurship within them, and they're just waiting for something to, trigger it. I don't think it's something that can be taught. I think you can teach skills around entrepreneurship, the skills required to be an entrepreneur on a daily basis, but something has to light the that ember. And it's the same thing. How does one become a champion? How does one become a world champion boxer or a world champion anything? Some spark inside them. They're all trained the same. They all do the same kinds of cardio. They all have everything. But what's the trigger that actually makes one person rise to that occasion?
Well, my time is now done, but I'm going to tell you all, you're about to meet another incredible entrepreneur who has his own spark. So I'll turn this over to Jody. Thank you all very much.
Jody, welcome.
Welcome.
I wanted to tell you that when I looked at your profile, the most amazing thing for me was that you were in the Navy. And I have great admiration for anybody who has the ability to go through that and then come out the other end. I'd love you to tell us a little bit about your story. What makes you scrappy?
Oh, God, what makes me scrappy? Probably I was given a girl's name. Start there. Have poor parents. Have a real strong desire to own a bunch of stuff because all your friends have stuff, get a chip on your shoulder, and then drop out of high school when your mom's a teacher. That's sort of where it started. And then I joined the Navy thinking that I was going to learn about computers, and instead learned that there were a bunch of people that I thought were dumber than me. And I spent the whole time trying to find a way to get kicked out.
And did you didn't succeed?
No, I managed to get out early.
Yeah, but you didn't get kicked out.
Depends on, that's nuance.
Oh, okay.
I have an honorable discharge.
And what was your first startup?
My first startup was, I had a fish tank cleaning business when I was 8 years old.
Okay, that's pretty
I used to
cool.
work at a pet store called Quality Critters, and I was 8 years old. I worked there on Sundays, and I became this expert on saltwater fish because I was fascinated by them. And a guy came in with a fish in a bag, and it was sick. And he said, "My fish is sick." And I looked at it, and I knew what was wrong with it. And I told him, I said, "Here's what you need to do. You need to clean your tank." And he said, "Will you come to my house and do this?" And this was in the 70s when nobody really worried about their kids going to somebody else's house. So I called my dad and said, "I'm going to go to this guy's house and clean his fish tank. Come pick me up afterwards." And I cleaned the guy's fish tank, and the guy says, "Here's $100. And I liked that. And he said, "Would you like to do that again?" And I said, "Yes, I would." So my dad came, picked me up, and then every Sunday at the pet store, somebody would come in, and I would sell him a fish tank and tell him about this fish tank cleaning business that I invented.
So then there was a trigger. The trigger for you, which is that lit that spark, I guess, was the ability, the knowledge that you could get money for doing something.
Yeah, I was trading.
Someone.
I was trading something that I knew for something that somebody had that I wanted.
Very cool.
Right, and by the time I was 9, I was making about $1,500 cash a month. I was making more than my father.
Wow. I'm still not making $1,500 a month, so you're doing pretty good. What was your first, I guess I'm not going to call it an adult startup because you weren't in the porn business, but what was the first startup you did as a person of age?
So when I got out of the military, I was a computer tech in the Navy, and I was really bad at it. But what I was good at was sales, and I knew that because I went and got a tech job. Since I had this basically 2 years of training on computers, I thought, go be a technician. I got a job for a day in Silicon Valley, walked in, I was the only person that spoke English in the lab, and walked out. And I opened the newspaper and found a job selling computers in a store. And I was selling computers for this guy who taught me, I think, everything I could have learned at that point about sales in a very short amount of time. And one of the things I learned was that there was this thing that was going to come out called a cell phone. And I rented a house across from Valley Fair Mall in San Jose, and we started selling car phones, and we were one of the first retail car phone stores in Northern California. And this was back when you sold a phone, you sold it at retail, and you got a commission check from the phone company, and you got a residual check from the phone company, and you got co-op dollars from the phone company, and you got credit on your phone bill in the form of cash. And ended up selling that business a couple years later.
Wow. So it kind of, you guys sold it to a bigger company that was probably in the middle of some kind of a roll-up?
No, I sold it to a guy who wanted the business, and I wanted to go skydiving.
Very nice. So let me ask you this. What is your thought vis-a-vis, or I guess nature versus nurture, when it comes to that entrepreneurship spark, hustle?
I think there are a lot of people that want to be entrepreneurs, and I think there are a lot of people that shouldn't be. Right, my father was a good example. My dad always wanted to be someone who, had his own business, and he tried it, and he sucked at it. And the reason he sucked at it was because he wasn't solving a problem that anybody had, and he wanted it just for the sake of wanting it. He had friends who had money, and my dad was working for a newspaper, and so he started a dry cleaning business, and he started at the worst possible time to start a dry cleaning business in Miami. The economy had gone to complete shit. He was the partner in the business who had no money in it, so he had to do all the work, and the other guys wrote checks, and then he was the one who had to go bankrupt at the end. And he kept trying to do other businesses after that, and that was sort of my example of a guy who wanted to be an entrepreneur but wasn't good at it. And I've sort of seen that throughout my life. I've seen people who have said, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. Well, not everybody's an entrepreneur, right? That's like saying I'm going to be a basketball player. There is no amount of basketballs I can shoot to go play professional basketball. Right? It's just not going to happen. So I believe that you're right, that there might be this little spark that can be ignited in someone that can cause them to act out of character. But I think that I definitely think that there is, for certain people, you just are an entrepreneur, right? You're constantly looking at solutions to problems that people have and finding a better way to solve it. And you can't sleep until you solved it, right? Or bump your head up against the wall trying.
So what would you say has been the single event that you've learned the most from in your career as an entrepreneur?
The single event.
Or any one event.
No, I think the main one is, there's probably one, and it's that, I had promised myself when I had to shut down a company in 2001. The economy was in the toilet. We were a streaming media company, and we were solving a problem that nobody had, right? I was doing exactly what my dad did. And I was doing it because there was easy money out there. There were VCs who were just insane in giving out money. I got recruited to go run a company with $10 million in cash in the bank the day I started with the company. And we were going to solve a great problem. We were going to make talk shows for radio stations, hosted by comedians who had never done longer than 5 minutes on radio. And we actually got a lot of distribution, but it was just a horrible business. And it was super expensive. You could do the same business now, just come, if you're funny, put a YouTube channel up, somebody will find you. And then I stopped working for 3 years and went and traveled around the world. And when I went back to work, I'd promised myself 3 things. 1, solve a problem people have. 2, make sure it's a big problem that they know they have. And 3, make sure that I'm one of the right people to be involved in solving it. And I got this job at a company called Claremail, which was a really great job, and I was in sales there and did really well, got back into working again. And then met a friend who had this idea to start a company that was going to solve a problem in the private travel business, right? We were going to build a booking engine for private jets. $12 billion hole in the travel industry, nobody solved it. And we thought, wow, $12 billion business, let's go build it. So in the process of starting this company, we were out raising money, and we were fortunate. We ended up doing a deal with Virgin, and we sold the company as a business plan to Richard Branson. And what we sold him was this brilliant idea that solved a problem that absolutely no one has.
Good for you. I guess there's a classic example of taking lessons learned from setback and then applying them to something great.
No, we actually didn't. That's my point. I went back into doing exactly what I promised myself I was not going to do, right? I was seduced by the idea of making money instead of the idea of solving a problem. And because we weren't solving a problem, when the economy went bad in 2007, 2008, and people were flying on private planes to go beg for money from Congress, right? The entire private jet industry shut down.
Okay.
Right? People were getting rid of their planes. And more importantly, people that fly on private planes weren't saying to their assistants, if you get me a better deal on a private plane, I'll do something for you. So again, we were solving a problem that nobody had, and I ended up leaving the company, about a year after we were part of Virgin, and my partner continued to try to run it, and it just wasn't a good business.
Okay. Well, with that, I want to thank you for the time, and I think that Alistair Croll is going to come on up now.
Thanks.
This is like the worst session to manage microphones for, I'm sure. So,
All right, well, you're live.
Yeah. I heard a whole bunch of stuff in that one. I think most people talked about jumping out of planes. That was like the common thread, right?
Well, I used to be a skydiving instructor.
Or being terrified of flying out of planes.
I used to actually teach skydiving.
Wow.
But, so tell us about you.
I have nothing interesting to add to this conversation.
Perfect.
No, I started a company here in Montreal called Corradian a few years ago, running websites for people, and then that was a train wreck. So we kept 20 people in the company and built an appliance that watches web performance that was actually useful because it showed you where people were stuck on your website and why, and that got bought by BMC last year.
Now, did that fall out of the first problem you were trying to solve?
Yeah, so we learned about it in that world, but I mean, it took us 10 years from the original idea to the right idea to, the first thing we did allowed us to discover the problem people actually needed solved. Mm-hmm. And then the rest of the time was figuring out how to tell them what we did and sell it to them easily, right?
You had to market the pain they weren't in, that
yeah,
they didn't
exactly.
know they were in.
And this is you said three things, and I think the best one was it's got to be solve a problem, a big problem, and that you're the right person to solve it. But you actually said solve a problem people know they have. And I think that's the key, is like, there's a lot of problems people have that they don't know they have, or they're not necessarily willing to admit they have, right?
That's like selling aspirin when you want to be selling antibiotics.
Absolutely. And so I think, the real issue here is a lot of us, how many people here are familiar with the Lean Startup movement? Right, so I'm going to give you don't have to buy any Lean Startup books, including the one I'm writing. Here's Lean Startup. Don't sell what you can make what you can sell. Like, that's all of Lean Startup, right? And the thing that I find most interesting about that is that the classic example of startups from a few years ago was two nerds in a basement build something, Dan and his friend, and then when it's done, they go get someone to sell it for them. And the model today is a sales guy goes and finds a need and then goes and finds a nerd to build it for him. Like, it's a total reversal of that archetype of the nerds in the basement, right?
That's how mine
Because
started.
the customer development is the first thing. It's front-loaded because that's where the risk is. And I think the lean model, because it's forcing you to get out of the office and ask people stuff and do customer development and pivot on needs and so on, is really changing the culture people think they need in a startup. That's transcendent, right? I mean, it's don't go build something until you got 100 customers. It's Kickstarter, it's all the crowdsourcing, crowdfunding stuff. And that's really different from where we were a few years ago.
Mm-hmm. So I have a different question for you. You mentioned something about having been in that business for 10 years.
Yeah.
Do you remember when you started it thinking how long you were going to be involved? Because
No.
you probably saw friends who were like, wow, they just started a company and a year later they exited.
Yeah, so the weird thing is we started here in Montreal, and we actually hadn't seen much of what was going on in the Valley. We just kind of did it, and it grew. And then VCs said, we'd like to give you money because you have a recurring revenue, and we like that. The thing that was weird is I now know this, that if you're starting a company, you're either doing it because of the lifestyle, or because you want to make money, or because you want to change the world. And it's only one of those three. A lot of people don't know that. So if I talk to an entrepreneur, the first thing I say is, look, is it a lifestyle business? In which case, how do you get it so you only have to come into the office one day a week and you've got smart people running it for you? Or is it change the world business where you want to, like Google, you're going to go big or go home and you're going to fundamentally change how we do something? Or the most likely bet, the middle bet, I want to make some money, in which case, what's your exit horizon for how much multiple, how much money can you take? And you can just work it back from the exit you're looking for. But most people run the business like it's a lifestyle business, have delusions of changing the world, and will wind up being the middle one but not knowing it. And that took me 10 years to realize.
Yeah. So if you were going to start another company today, would you start a lifestyle business? Would you try to change the world, or would you go for money? I
have a lifestyle business now because I get to run conferences and talk to people. But I think, the challenge, I think, is you've got to run I said earlier that your goal is to the bad thing to do is run it like a lifestyle business, hope it's a change the world business, and plan and actually be a make money business. I think the key is to run it like it's a make money business, because then you have an outcome and you're planning on goals. To aspire to run it like a lifestyle business, because then you're delegating a lot to smart people and not trying to do everything yourself, and you're building a business that can scale, and allows you to sort of step away from it, think about the big things, and then to aspire to run it like a lifestyle business, but aspire to great things, because that's where you get the vision and the valuation, you get smart people involved.
So everybody's asked the question, I'll ask you, do you think it's nature or nurture?
I actually think, I used to think it was nurture. I used to think it could be taught. So anybody here play StarCraft? Come on, you're all lying. All right. So my co-founder at Corradiant, Eric, and I used to play StarCraft, and I would build up this immense, impenetrable army and this fleet of ships, and I'd max out my resources, and I'd fly in with these crazy ships, and he'd be there cleaning up like the last Zerg. And I'm like, dude, what happened? He goes, I came in here with one more piece than the other guy, wiped him out. I left one for you, though, and he's literally chasing this one thing around, just leaving it for me. So basically, I was sitting here being incredibly risk-averse, right? I'm a product guy, but I'm not that guy that's going to go, let's jump out of the plane and see what happens. And Eric was the guy that actually dragged me out of doing safe consulting stuff and said, let's go start a company, because he was the guy that was like, I don't need to be successful. I just need to be $1 more successful than all the other competitors, and then I'm fine. Mm-hmm. So he definitely had that nothing to lose attitude. And I think that's the thing that I heard from all of you guys was that all of you had a rough upbringing, or rough, but mistakes along the way, stumbling along the way, figuring out what you know to do, nothing to lose, like really wanted to make it, but also had a little sprinkling of business acumen, law or business or whatever, and then a lot of fearlessness. And I don't know if those things are stuff that can be taught. I think maybe they have to do with upbringing, in which case it's nurture, but it's not the parent saying, I'm going to teach you. It's much more the circumstances,
Yeah, I think I agree with you, because I don't think that, I think the most common trait that I see in natural entrepreneurs is this unreasonableness. It's not irrational, it's unreasonable, that they just suffer, they don't suffer from the illusion that they're going to fail. They're looking for the ways that they can fail so they can mitigate those, but they're almost 100% certain that they can't fail because they'll figure it out.
Yeah, and I love the question, at what point did you realize you were in charge? Because there's this weird thing where you go into it with nothing to lose, and then you wake up one day and go, they have to listen to me. I'm the only guy that knows how it works. Like, there's this moment where like someone flips a switch and all of a sudden you're in charge. Mm-hmm. And that allows you to start like getting leverage and advantage in negotiations from which you can scale. And I think that moment of realizing, hey, I'm actually in charge here. Screw you all. Do what I say. Like, there's a moment when you turn to the investors and go, no, you're going to let me do it. I'm not sure that happens to everybody. I think it takes a certain personality disorder for that to happen.
Yeah. So what happens then when you go back to the office after realizing you're in charge and you're still in charge, and now you're in charge of the people instead of this deal where you had leverage, but now you're running your adult daycare center?
Yeah. And I think and the adult daycare center, I've worked with people who are the most amazing cogs in a machine. They don't aspire to be startups. They don't aspire to be entrepreneurs, but they're like the best oiled gear, perfectly machined, works awesomely. And those are really the guys that like, you want to build your business out of those people. They love being the best gear in the thing. Identifying that person, making them realize they are the absolute best cog in that machine is fantastic.
I think we're out of time.
Yep. All right, thank you very much. So thank you all very much for sitting here, and thank you to Gary, Rory, and Jody for being here to talk a little about street smart entrepreneurship. Have a great day.